I'd like to thank Augment Code for sponsoring this first season of Still Burning. I can remember my excitement when I saw my first IDE. You could find anything, you could change any code, and I was just so excited. But the era of making changes to code like a watchmaker is gone. Most of the changes now are going to be made by the genie, and Augment Code is helping go beyond the IDE with their new intent product. Programmers stay oriented, they keep learning, they see what's happened, they make strategic decisions, and meanwhile, agents go and do the detailed work. Amelia, welcome to Still Burning. It's great to have you here. First question, when did you first know that you were a geek?
Good question, Ken.
Do you mind me calling you a geek?
No,
Okay.
no, I take it as a compliment. So if we go all the way to the beginning, both my parents are software developers.
Okay, so natural.
And I decided that's exactly what I don't want to do.
What? Okay.
You see them go to work every day. They sit at a desk and they do that all day, and then they come home.
Okay.
And from the outside, it just looked very boring. And so I decided, even through college, I wanted to do something very different. And so after college, I moved to Texas to work in a research lab. And my plan was to be a psychologist in a prison.
Okay.
Because I thought that would be interesting for a long time. And the lab needed a website. So I actually built the first version of their website.
That's how we hook them.
Yeah, everybody needs a website at some point.
Yeah.
The first version I built was in Dreamweaver, and it was like a brain, and you clicked on the different parts of the brain to get to the different pages, and that was rejected immediately. So I had to learn how to make an actual website.
Uh-huh.
And so I went through Code Academy back in the early days and taught myself how to make a website, and I built them a website, and that ended up being the most fun part of my job.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't even have like interesting projects. I just rebuilt my website over and over again.
Interesting. Yeah.
And eventually I interviewed at a startup, and they offered me a job as their only front-end developer to work on a pretty complicated data analytics SaaS app.
Okay.
Like during the interview, they asked me, which JavaScript frameworks do you know? And I said, what's a JavaScript framework?
Uh-oh.
And for some reason, they hired me. And so there was a lot of learning on the job, but it was just this amazing mix of learning like technically complicated things and also getting to be creative with it.
Mm-hmm.
Where you get to do both, and I've been happy doing that ever since.
So something I want to pick up on is this idea of trying out, building the same thing over and over again. Mm-hmm. What were you looking for? Like, you already have it.
Yeah.
I've done exactly the same thing, and I think there's a lot of value to it, but it doesn't fit the mold of efficiency, or productivity, or the JIRA ticket's already been signed off on.
Yeah, I feel like that's the beauty of a personal site, is there's no goal,
mm-hmm.
right? It's just what is something that expresses you as a person?
Mm-hmm.
And I think I just rebuilt it because I would learn something new.
Mm-hmm.
And the only thing I could think of building was my own website, I guess.
Well, until you get bored, until you don't learn something new.
Yep.
Okay, so what are you building now?
So now, a long time later, I am
Oh, please, long time.
long ancient history to now. I've been things have been changing a little bit in the digital world.
Really? I noticed that too.
You too?
Yeah. Hmm.
AI has gone through a transformative time, and now we have these ridiculous models that are really good at fuzzy things.
Hmm.
And it seems like a new material that you get to play with in the digital world. And what I've been thinking about for a long time now is how does that change what we can build, and how might it change the way we interact with computers?
Okay.
So more tangibly, recently I've been working on basically what comes after the IDE.
Yep.
IDEs have been around for almost half a century,
Mm-hmm.
and they're wonderful, and every pixel has been crafted specifically for the job of reading code and understanding code and writing code.
Yeah, exactly.
And it seems like our first steps were to figure out how to take these new, like, fuzzy logic machines and put them in a sidebar. Well, first we did autocomplete, which was actually quite nice.
Yeah.
It was like giving you a little, like, moving sidewalk.
Right.
Like every
It's an acceleration of typing.
Yep. Yeah, and actually, I joined GitHub right before we launched GitHub Copilot, the autocomplete, and every person we talked to about it, their first reaction is, "We already have autocomplete. I guess I'll try it." And then, like, a week later, you talk to them, and they'd be like, "This isn't just autocomplete."
It wrote the whole function.
Yeah.
It wasn't just the name of the function. The whole rest of it appeared,
Yeah.
and it was almost right or completely right.
Yeah. Autocomplete, but not autocomplete.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly.
So first we had autocomplete, which is like moving sidewalks every now and then we're like, wait, they can do more, and so we put them in a sidebar in our IDEs, and then we gave them tools so they could read and write code, and then we've actually moved towards, like, CLI, right? Like, what if we had a bunch of agents in my command line and I'm running 10 at once? And I think people are really starting to feel the edges of the current tools, and it feels like our jobs are changing, where it's not 100% about reading and writing code, and it never really was in the first place, but often we would pretend it was.
So that's interesting. For me, it's not about reading and writing code. So can you characterize what else we were doing that maybe we didn't realize?
So this is actually a project I did at GitHub before AI was everything, where it was shortly after COVID, and actually GitHub is fully remote. And we talk about GitHub as like the place developers do like social coding, and it's like collaborative, but really we don't talk to each other before the PR. And so the impetus for the project was, how do we make a collaborative development environment
where the collaboration is more real time?
Yeah. Like when you're writing the code and when you're thinking about what the code should be. And it became very clear immediately that like, you think like, oh, okay, it's like Google Docs where you just put the multiple cursors in there and multiple people are reading and writing code, and, like, that's multiplayer. But it's immediately obvious that the bulk of the work is actually not in the code. It's in the linear issue, it's in the docs for the dependencies that you're using. It's in the conversations you're having with your coworkers.
Right. What information they have in their heads
Yeah.
and how that's spread around, and
Right.
when there's contradictions between what you understand and what I understand.
Right, which is in a lot of ways like the bulk of what we do as software developers, right? It's like getting the right context at the right time and applying it to the code base. And so in order to create an environment where you can truly work collaboratively, we needed like a membrane around any given piece of work that we were doing. And so it seems to me that right now we're working on speeding up. We're like accelerating with the tools that we have had previously.
Yep.
And it feels like we need a new primitive or 2 or 5. But one of the new primitives needs to just like put that membrane around the tasks so that we can work more quickly and we can collaborate with each other and we can collaborate with agents. So I've been working on a desktop app that tries to not replace the IDE, because there's a very long tail of things that developers like to do in their IDEs, and we're never going to build all of that, nor do we want to.
Mm-hmm.
But at least like adds that primitive where you can have 3 things going in the same project at once.
Okay. Yeah, I'm suspicious of that multiple things going at once because I have trouble handling it. I can have multiple projects going at once.
Yep.
I mean, an extreme programming thing is to pair, and as soon as you pair, you have half as many streams of changes coming into the code base as you had before.
Yep.
Which just makes the whole integration process that much easier. And in my own head, the integration process is getting harder when I've got multiple agents running on the same code base.
Yeah.
And I have to keep track of everything. I agree 100% on the IDE is, it's too strong a word, but it's not the primary context that we need. It was really good at helping you get to where you needed to make changes, and then making those changes in a lot of detail.
Yeah.
And I've been surprised by the appearance of CLIs. Like, that's a teletype.
Yeah.
I start on teletypes. Like, I thought I'd left that clackety behind, and then I saw that, there's the command line version. And then I tried it, and I really didn't miss the IDE, but I still miss some things about it. So it does seem like there's a replacement coming, and yeah, whoever finds it is. So I'm glad you're working on it.
This is actually how I feel about chatbots in general. Is like, it feels like we need to go to something more primitive in order to figure out what the building blocks are that we need to now build. Where like you're in the IDE, there's so much distracting you from thinking about how things could change, that we're like, okay, we're back to the CLI.
Yes.
It's all about text. Like there's no changes panel. We're just telling the agent what we want.
Yeah, except that puts the burden back on your head to remember everything that's going on.
And I think now that we've felt those frustrations and those tensions, now we can, like, with a fresh mind, rethink what is the environment that we want, and like what is the GUI, what are the buttons, right? Because a lot of buttons are just like shortcuts for CLI commands or for agent chats. So I think it's a necessary step along the way.
So you have this sense of play, of doing things for learning, not for production. Is that easier or hard in your current job to maintain that sense of play without everything having to have a specific purpose?
Play is always hard to, it's always sometimes hard to justify.
Okay.
Where it doesn't seem like you're going directly from point A to B, where B is like, your like KPIs or what is it that you need to build or complete. It feels like you're like going in a different direction or just looking at what directions are out there, but it's more necessary than ever. Because I think without play, we won't like we will only be able to iterate on our current interfaces iteratively.
Yes.
I think there's no way without stepping back and without trying something and there not being consequences for the things you try. Like when I think of play, I think of a sandbox, right? Like we initially learned physics in the sandbox because there's no repercussions and because we get to try something and see what happens. Like it seems to me the like ideal place to learn something. Especially things that are like further away from current day where there's like lower stakes and there's not much friction between trying things and getting feedback.
And I think we're going from an era where we were making fine little tweaks on known processes to build software to having to make big tweaks. I mean, it's like simulated annealing. If the crystals are mostly aligned, then you can be cool. But when things are at the beginning stages of simulated, you got to turn the heat up.
Yeah.
And this focus on productivity is in that refinement stage. And what we're talking about is like if you want to create the revolution, you got to really be shaking stuff up. It's not predictable. Doesn't happen on a schedule. You can't budget for it and then know exactly, okay, on this date I'm going to reach this. Like KPIs in general are one of those highly refined, making small incremental steps towards small incremental improvements.
Yeah.
So, are you working with a team to do this?
So we have a team now. I think responding to some of your points, 90% of the work was just figuring out what to build. And I mean, the motivation was just like software is changing. What might it look like? And that's a very wide open space. And so the beginnings of the project were just thinking about what's the new medium that we're working with and what might it look like. And it looked very different at different points. There's a lot of prototyping. It was like a CLI commands. It was a part of the VS Code extension. Like fundamentally, it was many different things at many different points. And I think importantly, there was no linear progress that was necessary because like you don't want to ratchet and then be like, okay, we have to go from here. You want to be able to blow it away and say, with our new learnings, maybe not that direction, or maybe these things were good from that direction.
So are you a leader on this team?
This is very casual.
Okay.
I think a lot of the overall direction at this point comes from me.
Okay.
But the really nice thing about developer tools is the people who are building them have opinions about how they should work.
Right.
The really nice and the really frustrating thing.
Yeah. I remember talking to a kind of an old school manager once. He said, well, how do you manage when the programmers won't do what you tell them to do? And I thought, man, you're not going to make it here. I was at a place that was doing a lot of really creative stuff. So I assume you're in that same position where everybody on the team's got an opinion. You don't have a roadmap where you can say, all right, well, you go do this thing, you go do this thing. How do you maintain that sense of play? How do you balance a sense of play and a sense of urgency there?
So when I was at GitHub, I was on the R&D team, and the R&D team is made up of people who are pretty expert in the things that they have experience with, all of which are different. So there's this nice Venn diagram of like people's expertise, and they overlap a little bit, and they would squat up. And I think that environment was nice because there wasn't much urgency. It was just, you're here to explore. Go explore, and maybe if you hit something, things will be great. But it was also very uncomfortable in some ways because you know that you're being paid by a company and they expect certain things. And the fact that those things weren't explicit was actually like, I think it just didn't work for some people. So I think some people really need that sense of urgency in order to do work that they find fulfilling. And they need users to help direct them in what they build. And for some people, they didn't need that at all. Like they were more comfortable. Like we had some people from research backgrounds, which I think lends itself a little bit more to a more ambiguous, like self-directed environment.
Yeah.
It feels pretty directed because there's just so many ideas that we have. We have a long backlog of ideas of things that we want to add. And we're almost holding ourselves back from because it seems so easy to build things now. And there's still like a maintenance burden.
How do you figure out when it's time to take out a completed, I'm not going to say failed experiment? You think, oh, this will be a good idea. You put it in there, you look at it, you go, no, it's not good. It's a successful experiment in that you got the feedback. How do you balance that with, oh, but we want to see the next experiment and the next one and the next one?
Yeah, that's a good question. And it's been interesting because the project it began as a prototype and it slowly like increased in fidelity until all of a sudden we're like, we got to ship something. And we like very quickly ship something.
Okay.
And it's nice that it's still in beta, which is a label that we use to say like, hey, we're still experimenting and like things will change. And there have been some features where like you can get really excited about them and then you add them and it keeps breaking. And you're like, I don't know, like it doesn't seem like there's as much value to this for our users. Like it's always for me it's always design is always a question. Like the way you decide whether a design is good is somewhere between craft and intuition and taste and like data and feedback. And it's been nice having users to get that feedback for what are they actually finding valuable. Although with prototypes, it's always hard to distinguish, is this a direction thing or is this an implementation thing?
Right, because it's just not fast enough, and if it was faster or if it integrated a little better with something else, it might be good.
Yeah, and the signal will look exactly the same.
Yeah.
So that's something that's really hard. But I think I like to keep adding features, and I've had to learn to also take them out.
What's a direction that you're excited about now that you're not working on?
One thing that's been really interesting is a lot of the way that the app works is baked into, we have specialists, which are basically personas, like prompts for specific types of agents. Like there's a coordinator agent, an implementer, or PR reviewer, or UI designer. And it's mostly like a like natural language prompt that you write that anyone could write and anyone could tweak. So like you spin up a task and the coordinator will research, how do I add this feature into this code base? It'll make a spec for you. It'll, once you approve it, it'll delegate the tasks in waves. It'll have a verifier come in. And all of that behavior, users come in and they think it's baked in because that's the way software has worked historically. And it's all just a prompt.
Okay.
And so they complain about it and we say, go tweak the prompt or make your own. And it just seems like a paradigm shift for the way software works right now. So there's a lot of interesting future directions of like building that out and making it like very customizable software in a way that didn't seem possible before.
It hasn't been possible since Smalltalk. I'll be a geezer now. Part of the Smalltalk ethos is that you were responsible for the tools that you were using. And if you didn't like how they worked, you hit Control-C, you'd look at the stack and you go, well, let me fix the text editor or whatever it was. So I'm very happy to see that back again. And I always was uncomfortable with this. Well, I'm a tool builder and you're just a tool user. I'd like those to be a lot closer so that there's a smooth transition. If you just want to be a tool builder, it's fine.
Yep.
But or tool user, it's fine. But then if you want to, like, okay, yeah, now I want things to work differently, you can find a way to make that happen.
Yeah.
So yeah, that'll be exciting. But it also, like, configuration management.
It can be horrible.
Right. It's somebody's changed their environment and it's in some kind of weird way that conflicts with how somebody else is.
And there's no customer support because you did it to yourself.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly.
I'm very excited to see how apps change, is like the paradigm of what an application is.
Yeah.
And I think we might go towards like a remix culture where I share something, but that's not set in stone. And like I can download like Kent your app, and then I say I don't like this part of it, and instead of sending you an email and saying Kent, can you please change it, I can just change it on my own computer and share my version.
Yeah, it's like that fork, tweak, upstream, open source, but applied to a lot more things.
Yeah.
A sense that I've gotten out of the things that you've said is that you enjoy this progression from I have some image in my head and now there's a thing in the world. How does that play out for you, whether professionally or elsewhere?
I feel like that's the main motivation for me to do anything. It's just, it's amazing that you can think something in your head and then you put effort in, and that effort is important, and then you see it in the world and you react to it. There's a thing I always think about with it's very, everyone does this, but it's very obvious with painters.
Okay.
Where there's a loop that they go through where they will step forward and paint a little bit, and then they'll step back and look at it and evaluate and then plan the next thing that they do. And we all do this, right? Like when I take notes, I never look at them later, but it's to take things out of my head and put them down and then look at them and then have my next thought. And so for me, it's like doing that loop over and over again and eventually getting to somewhere where I can look at what has come out of that process and think it's a thing that should exist in the world. I think whether it's drawing or thinking or software, that loop feels very core to what I find motivating.
That stepping back moment, I recognize it exactly. That seems to be a skill that needs to be learned, at least by some people. I'm very concerned with juniors. I think now is a wonderful time to be a junior programmer, but there's a lot of hype going on that would make it sound like it's a terrible time to be there. I'm worried that juniors are going to get panicked. They're going to get in, they're going to add a feature, never really learn the lessons and never learn how to step back. Was there a moment you learned that stepping back? Was that just natural to you?
I think earlier you talked about bringing play into work. And I think maybe play is the motivation behind stepping back. Like I think if I think about the times I'm stressed out about a deadline, it doesn't feel like there's time to step back.
Correct.
And you're like, go, like pedal to the metal, code, and you can very easily get yourself into a hole where like you've gone very far, but in what direction? I don't really know. Was it the right direction? Sometimes, but oftentimes not. And I think like as a junior developer, you definitely feel the urge of like, I've been hired to do a thing.
Right.
I have a list of these things that I need to do. The faster I do them, the prouder these people will be of me. And I don't know. I feel like everyone has to go through that. Unless they're like a very wise person, which I was not.
or self-involved, which I was. I never had a problem with that rolling back.
Huh.
That always felt very natural to me, which makes it hard for me to teach somebody else except by example. If I'm pairing with a junior and say, yeah, we did that. It's kind of a mess. Let's throw that away and start over. That I saw your eyes go up.
Terrifying.
Yeah, exactly that moment. And I did have to learn that. I remember Ward Cunningham was my first mentor, the guy who invented the wiki, and we had one of those situations. Had some code, made some changes. It was kind of okay, but it was kind of getting away from us. And he just reached over and turned the computer off, and I just about jumped out of my skin. The next day, we started over from where we were, and 15 minutes later, we had everything we'd done in the previous day, and the code was clean. And I went, oh, okay. But if we don't teach the kids how to do that, they're not going to learn. The question I was trying to ask is, was there a moment like that where you strike me as somebody who knows how to do that, to take that step back and go, as opposed to just being addicted to do. Am I getting you wrong?
I'm trying to think of a specific moment.
Okay.
I remember early days in my career as a developer, both sides.
Okay.
Right? There's the frantic, we got to do something. Oh no, there's a bug. Let's try it in every single browser. When it probably would have been better to step back. And then also, I think I had better perspective when someone else is working on something.
Mm-hmm.
Because you're inherently far away from the problem and from the solution that they're working on. And maybe just working as part of a team and having that community so that you're naturally looking at things from far away, and maybe you can learn and also see how other people step back. I think this is something that will be harder though.
It's so addictive. The genie is just so addictive.
It is. But it also changes our relationship with code, where if you can prompt something and it writes 1,000 lines of code, maybe it also helps that to feel less valuable. And to be able to throw it away because you can easily regenerate it.
Yeah.
And in some ways, there's this feature within Augment and I think other AI tools where you write something and you hit a button and it enhances the prompt. And it turns your 10-word thing into a 200-word thing.
Okay.
Like the opposite of the TLDR, which feels wrong, right? But it's kind of what we're doing in some ways with these LLMs, where there's so many assumptions baked into the words that I'm saying that previously a human would have to turn into code, right? There's the very concise thing, which is a set of words. And then the almost maximally expanded thing, which is the code that does that thing. And it seems like enhanced prompt gets you here. So it's spread it out a little so you can see those assumptions.
Right.
And then you can tweak them, and then it can extrapolate more to the entire code base. And it seems like the thing that you're doing in that first pass is getting a sense of what the full thing could be. And maybe you've gone down the wrong path. And that informs what those next 10 words could be, or 200 words.
One of my first projects, it volunteered to build a special purpose testing framework just for the project I was working on that would render the differences between the actual and expected in some kind of domain-specific way. I thought, whoa, that was really cool. And now I hate it when it does that. But I think you're right. There are assumptions baked in. People say, and going back to Dijkstra, natural language is a horrible programming language, but it still persists. So there has to be something there, something going on, and this idea that we can be both use the advantages of natural language and enhance it, that that seems like the right direction for the tools to take.
Yeah, it's a bad programming language because of all the assumptions baked in. Like it's a lossy compaction. If there's some shared assumption of what those assumptions are,
well, as long as
there's understanding.
Yeah, as long as the assumptions are shared, it's not lossy anymore.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that was my experience with the people that I've paired with for many hours has been that you end up kind of sharing a brain.
Yeah.
And then you can work on the code for a while, and I come back and I don't even notice that I didn't write it because we worked so closely together.
It makes me wonder, like one of the worst things is reading someone else's code because it's closer to the way that they think about things than the way you would think about the same things. And it's the same thing with like design, like Figma boards, right? Like I'll go in there and use this infinite canvas and like I'll put all my stuff everywhere, and then someone else comes in and I'm like, it's obvious, like it's right over here, but it's like so close to the way I think about it that it's harder than something more structured. And I wonder how using LLMs to write the code is going to change. Like, it makes me think of when we started using linters for like, people would argue about how do you align things in your code and like, what's the spacing, and like people kind of stopped talking about that. Like Prettier kind of just like, or like in JavaScript, right? You don't need to think about that. We don't need to talk about it. Like, how many hours did we spend a month talking about that previously?
Yeah, and I remember right when Prettier came out, I was at Facebook, and we had knockdown drag-out. You know, you take my tabs and spaces out of my cold, dead hands.
Yeah, exactly.
It just seems ridiculous now.
Yeah, what things will seem silly?
What things will seem silly?
That's a good question.
That's a great question.
I don't want to answer. The only thing I can think of is like JavaScript frameworks. Like we had these crazy JavaScript framework wars. Like people have very strong opinions about which one you use, and when you're not the one writing the code, it doesn't seem to matter as much.
Where I think it still matters is there's a very fundamental divergence in thinking between one-shot and iterative. There are people who kind of act like if I just get the prompt more and more and more and more and more and more and more precise, then it'll generate the whole app and I'll be done, and I can just one shot. And then if something's wrong, I go and tweak the prompt and it'll regenerate the whole thing from scratch and it'll be perfect, but with whatever changes. And I don't think that scales very well. It scales way farther than I would have expected it. But the other version is, okay, I have a thing, I'm going to use a prompt to change the thing into the next version of the thing, and I'm going to continue that process. And there are, the Genie acts like it's infinitely capable of making those iterative changes, and it's not. It runs off the end of the pier at some point, big splash, away you go. And there are structures that are more conducive to that kind of iterative change, and different of the JavaScript frameworks have different properties for that kind of iterative change versus one shot. So I think it still matters, but I don't think we even really know, because we built the ergonomics for humans into the frameworks for so long. Like, what if you had a framework that was really easy for the Genie to manipulate and humans couldn't understand any of it, just hieroglyphics? Would we use that? Yes, we would use that. We'd lose human comprehension if in the process we gained the ability to continually change the thing, because the ability to change that, that's the options value that's embedded in the system that we're building. And so I don't think the JavaScript war, like framework wars are over, but I think there's another invasion coming that we don't even really see. We've been so used to, if I can't understand it in detail, if I can't imagine the registers and what all the transistors are doing, I'm dead. And it was true for a long time, still kind of true, but maybe not so much.
Yep.
What's that going to be like in 2 years, in 5 years, in 10 years? Like nobody can really predict it. So I think it's exciting times. I think that frameworks matter, but not for the reasons that they used to matter. And that's going to change things.
Yeah, I think it's all about ergonomics and the way in which the code will be steered.
Yeah, and it's whose ergonomics.
I think the question I keep coming back to is what parts need to be rigid and deterministic and programmatic and steerable by humans, and which parts get to be like loosey-goosey, like assumptions, like fluid. It's okay if that's not exactly what I want as a user.
And we were used to everything having to be precise. I mean, that was part of the transformative experience for me learning programming as a kid. Was I think I understood exactly what I wanted in my head, and I'd type it in and I'd get completely different results than what I was hoping for. And I was like, but wait, I was perfectly precise. And I was in a sense, and I wasn't in a sense. But what we need to be precise about, all of that's changed.
Yep.
And we all have to get used to that.
Yeah, it is interesting. Like you hear programming related to thinking, like in a lot of ways it's thinking through the edge cases and like the logic of what exactly things need to be like. And we're already like many steps up the ladder of abstraction.
Right.
Like we're not doing it from scratch, right? Like if you think about painting, like I'm not making my colors anymore. And I don't want to be, because I get to build more and bigger things or paint bigger paintings because I don't have to do all the nitty gritty. And it seems like in a lot of ways we're going up another level. But it also feels different.
Yeah.
Because it's not like a higher level programming language, because it now isn't deterministic.
Right.
Which just like feels like this weird alien.
Why do we let go of this? We just kind of knew how things were working.
We have to go back. I don't know. It in a lot of ways also we get to make digital things feel more human.
Interesting.
And if you think about our devices today and our devices historically, we are meeting them where they are, because we need to translate our intention into device language, like type it in a keyboard, like click around a website. I have to have a mental model of like how the website works under the hood, and go to the settings panel to change the appearance, light and dark mode. It seems like our devices get to move more towards us, and we get to act more human with them, where we can steer them with natural language and without learning about the way they work.
Yeah, I made a distinction between intentions and actions. My intention might be, let me add a layover to this trip.
Yeah.
But then the actions that I have to take are oftentimes quite low level. But if I was a travel agent, I'd have even lower level actions. And I'd have to synthesize this intention out of a string of all of these very detailed actions. And now I'm starting to get frustrated when I have to add an address to my address book, and there's a piece of text that's the address and the phone number and somebody's name and a note, and I copy it. And then I go to the address book and I have to like paste part of it in here and part of it in there. And I'm like, what?
You're like, you know what I want.
Exactly.
Make me do that.
I'm used to my computer now being able, like if I was in ChatGPT, or
Yep.
what I'd just say, here's an address, add this to my
Yeah.
address, but
Yeah.
it would
Yeah.
figure that out. But most of the most of my computing is not set up for that.
There's an experiment I did a while ago where I like to talk my ideas out. Like typing is a little too slow sometimes when like you're really just talking about things that you have to comprehend when they're coming out of your mouth. And it would like turn them into index cards that are grouped together into categories. And I want to bring it back because it's really it was just like an interesting way to interface with your own ideas.
Mm-hmm.
And actually, the most
I want to see
interesting.
this, by the way.
I can show you the video. The most interesting thing that came out of that exploration was I added, of course, I added voice, but as you're talking, you also want to perform actions. So you're like, oh, add more cards to that group on the right. And I didn't need to change the mode.
Mm-hmm.
I could just keep talking. I'm like, oh, here's the idea, blah, blah, blah. Oh, add more cards to that group. And then you go back to the ideas. And like, you don't even need to tell the computer whether you're talking through your ideas
or the meta.
Yeah, telling it like how to interact with the primitives. And I think that's something we haven't pushed very much in interfaces, but feels very different from the way that I'm used to working with my computer.
Right. I'm typing text into a text editor, and then I go to format whatever, and those are two very different kind of gestures, and what happens when those start to squish together.
Yeah, it's very weird and exciting.
One last question for you. What scares you about this process that we're all going through right now? What is it that wakes you up at night?
I think there's the very obvious scary thing, which is with any change, especially a change that happens quickly, and this is like a very large, very fast moving change. We might, as like a human race and as a society, end up in a good place after it, but things get pretty rocky in the meantime. And so figuring out how to facilitate that and take care of people who are living through it right now feels very important. But
And are you scared that we're not going to do that as a society?
I think that leads into maybe the more interesting thing that scares me, which is I see us taking these incremental steps where we're like, here we are, let's add chat to an IDE, right? Like, let's do the next obvious thing. Let's add a GUI around the CLI tools. And I think if we do that, we're doing a random walk into the future.
Mm-hmm.
And there's no directionality of like where it will go and no consideration of where we want to go.
Okay.
And the thing that I'm most interested in injecting into the environment right now is like, maybe we should do that step back and like think about a North Star, right? Like, what is worth moving towards? Like, how do we want to work with computers? What do we want to build? And like, obviously, you're not going to say it and then it becomes a thing. But if you have that, you at least know, like, okay, we're going north. Our next step should be vaguely in this direction. And I think that thing can change, but I think not enough people have that longer term thinking and like more ambitious, like things can change. Things will probably change a lot,
Mm-hmm.
which means a lot of opportunity for good and a lot of opportunity for bad. Okay. And I just want people to like at least have a North Star to start moving towards.
Thank you so much. What a delightful conversation. I really appreciate it.
Thanks so much. This was fun.